Well, thank you very much indeed, Margus, for that very kind introduction. Delighted to be with you. Good morning, everybody. I can report actually that, yes, indeed, it's very warm in Vilnius, and we have beautiful blue skies with sunshine and plus 20 degrees temperature. So it's very nice here indeed. And just reflecting on the past year that's been, and my goodness, what a year it's been. We've had everything from pandemics to geopolitical tensions. We've had working from home, the phenomenon that's changed our lives, and indeed we've even seen spacecraft landing on the surface of Mars. So by any measure, it's been an incredible year, extraordinary, and of course there's been profound changes on society and on businesses and how we operate and collaborate together. To me, it feels a little bit like the age of exploration. And when I was a kid, I used to love those movies with the great tall ships and where the brave adventurers would head out to the ocean, explore new territory. And history has a habit of repeating itself. And in the times we live in now, the businesses, society, we're all searching for those new trade paths, those new ways of working, and collaborating across all our partners to create value and bring society with us. So in today's session, what I'll do is I'll give an introduction to Western Union, let you know about where we are in the market, and then after that, I'll walk through six principles for success. And really, these are observations from the market about how we adjust and adapt to the changing market, and some lessons to share from there. So without further ado, I'll move on then to introduce a little bit about Western Union. So Western Union, and our tagline is all around moving money for better. And we are a world leader in the area of remittances. So in other words, the movement of funds from people back to their home countries predominantly. But not only that, we're expanding into various different consumer segments, into the business sector as well, B2B as well. So many different elements to our business. The story of Western Union has been a story of change. And this year, in fact, we're celebrating 170 years anniversary. So it's really been an incredible journey, and it's all around the art of change, adapting to the times we live in. Western Union has a long heritage in innovation. We are famous for the telegraph, survived 2 world wars, and then in more recent history, we've been innovating with different technologies like the telex, for example. We innovated the stock ticker and provided analytics to the Dow Jones. And in fact, Western Union was the first country in America to commission a commercial satellite for its communications. So always had an eye on the technologies and the changing technologies. In today's market, we started out with a license to move money domestically in the United States, and then very quickly we expanded beyond that, and today we're very much a global provider with a footprint in every corner of the globe. So just some of the top level numbers to give you a sense of the scale of Western Union. Today we're serving 150 million plus consumers around the world, over 200 countries and territories, and 130 currencies globally worldwide. So it really is a tremendous success story. Amazingly, throughout the pandemic, the business model of Western Union has been incredibly resilient. And we've come through it with a very strong financial health and a very strong balance sheet. And that's very important for us. And it's one thing, it may be a kind of a traditional thing, but we keep one eye on the financial health. And the reason for that is it helps us, enables us to invest in the next wave, in the next value propositions, the next technologies. So we're continuing that journey over time. So also just to introduce a little bit about Western Union closer to home. Western Union is known as EUROC, European Operations Center, and they opened their doors here in Vilnius in May of 2010. So in fact, we recently celebrated a 10-year anniversary, and it's been a tremendous success story. Today we have over 50 nationalities, everyone's multilingual. I'm amazed. They have 2 or 3 languages and no problem. Everyone can speak very freely and easily. Highly qualified team. I'd also mention, and I'm particularly proud of this, is around our investment into robotics. And today we have over 100, I call them colleagues, robotic colleagues, 100 plus processes which are automated. And that brings huge advantages and benefits. Western Union has really invested a lot over the years into this technology and the whole skill set and building up that team in this area, and will continue to do so in the future. So it's really a multidisciplinary site. It's actually the largest site in Western Union estate worldwide, and today it employs around 2,000 people. It's one of the most important employers in the region here in Vilnius. So a tremendous success story. We're serving all the different regions, and typically, you know, from Europe, Asia Pacific, and the Americas, everywhere, and there are different teams in different time zones working around the clock to serve the consumer. So that's a brief overview of Euroc. And next I'll go to 6 principles for success. So these are really a kind of a mixture of observations of what's happening out in the market, some of the mega trends that are shaping the services, the industries, and what are the things, how it plays out in terms of Western Union, what it means for us, and also for many of our partners out there across the forum. You'll have observed many similar things, and we share those experiences in common. So the first of those 6 principles is all around the concept of adapt or die. And I've really taken cue from the concept of Darwinism, where it's not always the strongest that survive, but it's those that are most able to adapt and adjust are the ones that survive into the future. So in a way, business models have a lifespan of their own, and that mirrors biology. I like to think of it in that sense. And the example I like to use in terms of this adapting or dying is the example of the humble fridge. And I actually have a very close friend who was born in North Carolina in the 1930s. And today he's a retired chap enjoying his retirement as a retired Marine. But back in those days, in the 1930s, when he was a kid growing up, this is what refrigeration looked like. So the Iceman or the Icewoman would harvest giant blocks of ice from the frozen lake and then deliver it on the back of a truck or a cart to the home. It would be carved up, packed into ice boxes, and keep the food refrigerated. And then innovation happened, technology moved, and we saw the advent of the electrical refrigerator. And so that meant that the business model was undermined. Initially, it was a few wealthy families who could afford a fridge, and then it quickly went into mass market. So we saw how technology can really make a business model obsolete. But that said, one of the key takeaways for me is that although one part of the business model perished or became obsolete, another part of it survives and is very much alive to this day, and that's the whole concept of home delivery. So during the pandemic, it's absolutely exploded. And personally, I haven't set foot inside a supermarket for over 12 months. And that brings with it a lot of convenience as well. So the point I wanted to make here is that really it's a dynamic picture. If we look at, in fact, actually, Western Union had also, in its model, started to deliver cash out to homes in certain markets in certain regions as a help to those who are impacted by COVID, by the pandemic. So we can see that even translated into the financials markets. In terms of like the valuations of companies, we can see the Dow Jones. Historically, the top 10 valued companies were in oil and gas. Today, that's very much transformed, and we see the top valuations in data and information technology. So constantly evolving. From a procurement point of view, we're keeping one eye on having enough adequate supply of our hardware, our services, those kind of software, but on the other hand, keeping an eye on the next generation so that we give ourselves enough flexibility with our partner dealings so that we can jump on the next wave and move forward. So in terms of Western Union and how it's been adapting or adjusting to the changing market, we're really using our innovation, and I would characterize our business as kind of revolving around two twin pillars. On the one hand, we have our expanding digital footprint, and that's something that was already in place for many years. We were already investing and building up our skill sets, our disciplinary teams there. But really, with the advent of the pandemic, that really was turbocharged, and we saw a huge acceleration there. We were delighted to see growth rates of 40% plus, both in movement of principal amounts, but also in the traffic through our mobile apps. And the woo.com app is now one of the most downloaded app in its category. So tremendous success there. On the other side of that twin arrangement is around the area of retail. And there we have over 550,000 retail agents around the world. We very much partner with banks, post offices, retail outlets, foreign exchange houses, you name it, across the board. It's very diverse. So there we adjusted based on the health guidelines of each territory, and we supported our retail partners through even the supply of COVID material, medical equipment for their point of sale, but also giving them regular updates and adjusting as the health picture changed over time. So important to say that retail, we offer our consumers choice. So they have the choice of either digital or retail. And a large segment of the consumer that we serve is around the unbanked or underbanked. So the United Nations estimates that there's something between 1.5 to 2 billion people who are in that segment who rely on cash, actually, and it's their preference. So although at this event within the forum, we may have typically, most people would have a preference for digital. There are many parts of the world where cash is king, and that's really important for their day-to-day business and their livelihood. So all around, keeping the procurement flexible, resilient, and making it fast and having a speed to market is very important. One of the key lessons from the pandemic for me was all around this area of single point of failure. So in the health context, we saw that in the early stages of the pandemic, there were shortages of face masks. In the later stages, there were shortages of vaccines. And similarly, in the area of technology, we saw, due to the pandemic, we saw widespread disruption of semiconductors or the chip market. And this is one of those really critical components that is absolutely essential for all electronic devices, from the home to mobile to tablets to industry to agriculture, you name it. Chips are embedded everywhere. And it really brought home that we had a kind of, due to many years of globalization, a concentration of manufacturing in the Far East, where we depended on some core locations for chip manufacture and distribution. So I'm thinking of typically Taiwan or South Korea. But within that, it became kind of clear that there is some risk around those concentrations, particularly in the context of maybe not always the friendliest neighbor with China next door or North Korea next to South Korea. So a lot of the policymakers, a lot of the governments are rethinking about, particularly around those critical infrastructures, bringing them closer to home. We're seeing new waves of investments in Europe and in North America, where new facilities are created around this, and not just chips, but many other technologies. So in a sense, it's kind of shortening that supply chain. So that's the first one, all around adapt or die. The second one is all around picking your technology specialisms. I like the quote from Larry Summers that we're in chapter 1 of a 100-chapter book. The technology out there is vast. It's almost like a limitless ocean. So the way I kind of get my head around it is to try and categorize it into two kind of domains, if you like. On the one hand is this kind of positive impact of technology. And for me, the great bright spot is around the smartphone, particularly around the kind of consumers that we're serving, where they can, that's really radically transformed life in many parts of the world. So getting access to communication, being able to make payments through smartphone, starting to look into microloans, and even going beyond that into trading and setting up commercial enterprises, all through the access through the internet. So a tremendous enabler for society, enabler that Western Union has built upon through its network of partners, delivering value out to the consumers. So that's on the positive side of the equation. And then on the negative side of the equation is around the threats that come through, unfortunately, through cybercrime. And we've seen in recent years a tremendous surge in this area, either through state-sponsored crime or through sophisticated crime on demand. And that can really have incredible impacts on infrastructure, core infrastructure like energy, hospitals and so on, but also on livelihoods, on people's businesses. So those two kind of core areas, how I would shape it, really kind of informs our investment into technology. On the one hand, we're investing in and procuring and working with our partners to build those growth-orientated value streams which we'll offer to the consumers and to the businesses. And then on the other hand, we're working with those specialist niche providers to all around cybercrime. For this session, I've kind of broken out 3 examples, and I kind of like to think of these technologies almost as modules, that add-ons on top of our cross-border platform. So just for the purposes of today, I'll walk through three of those. The first one is around user experience and real time. So in the payments industry, convenience and a smooth user experience is really important. And delighted to say that we've moved from around 50 countries which provide real-time account payment processing up to 80, and now we're targeting to get to 100 countries very soon. So tremendous example of private enterprises working with the regulators in Europe with the SEPA payments regulation to enable those kind of improvements in the end user experience. The second one is all around machine learning. And again, in the payments industry, for those of you who are not part of that area, it's important for us in terms of tracking the volumes and the patterns of payments, spotting any unusual variations that would alert us around potential risk or potential cybercrime. So again, a lot of investment happening here in Euroc Centre in Vilnius and wider through all our estates throughout Western Union. And the third one I would highlight is around the area of digital identity. And this is kind of a crucial trade-off that we all have our own individual tolerance, our own kind of how we interact with that. And it's a trade-off between our digital privacy versus the convenience of accessing so many services on demand. So in there, Western Union really putting a great emphasis on the importance of safeguarding the digital identity of our consumers and our businesses. We procure a lot of services in this area, and we've seen a lot of technologies such as tokens and biometrics developing the convenience here. All of those modules sit on top of our cross-border platform where we manage and settle billions of transactions each and every day, all the currency conversions and so on. And this platform is available either as a branded platform, white label, or co-branded. So we give the full flexibility there. All our procurement decisions are very much aligned to our business goals. We want to make sure we have the strong business cases to invest in those different modules of technology over time. A key part in the financial industry is about the risk mitigation. Trust is absolutely the cornerstone of our business, and we really kind of make sure that those are in place. And then, of course, we have these niche providers. So in a way, we have fintechs providing services to other fintechs in this kind of circular ecosystem. And lastly, we work very closely with the regulators, because without the regulators, we wouldn't have a license to operate in those markets. So enterprise technology, I think of it like the Golden Gate Bridge. Once you finish painting one end of the bridge, you almost start from the beginning again. It's almost like lifelong learning, and the investment into enterprise technology is a moving picture, constantly changing. One thing I would say from a procurement point of view is that typically we're migrating from, or the trends are moving from investing in going from large machines to smaller machines, from expensive bespoke software licenses to more open source software. And why is that important? Well, that's important because it means it frees our hand. We recognize we need to spend a big chunk of our budget on keeping the lights on, keeping the operations going. But as we invest in this modern technology stack, this cloud-based stack, then that frees up our hand to invest also in the development CapEx, which is all around creating those new business cases, those new developments for the next wave, for the future. So that's number 2, picking your technology specialisms. So principle number 3 is all around the demographics, so minding the demographics. And this is a really uneven picture. When we look across the globe, we see certain markets are really expanding rapidly. In particular, I'm thinking of places like Southeast Asia, Indonesia, or parts of Africa, in particular Nigeria, for example. Enormous markets, enormous populations. The growth in Africa is predicted to be up to 2/3 over the next coming decades, moving from 7+ billion people up to around 10 billion in the coming decades to 2050. So all of that brings a lot of nuance about how a provider like Western Union serves those different markets. But as I say, it's uneven, and in other parts of the world, there are aging populations. So for example, in Europe, markets like Italy, in the Far East, places like Japan have aging populations, and even in more recent times, places like China, surprisingly, is also showing signs of aging populations. But in terms of payments, that kind of gives us a lot of insights into the traffic and the volumes of payments, and we can target specific value propositions. So for example, many people send money to their loved ones back home to their parents or to their grandparents. And we know that people in the later stages of life spend more of a disproportionately large amount of their income, their disposable income, on healthcare. So we can create those value propositions for older people and our messaging around that. And similarly, on the flip side, around younger demographics, there are things like providing remittances that fund education, third-level education, and so on. But top line, if we take the top line across it, it's growing very tremendously. And I came across one stat which was just mind-blowing, that we will be building a city the equivalent to the size of New York City every month for the next 40 years to house all these people. The stock of housing will double between now and 2050. So remarkable changes ahead. So in terms of the demographics, we're very much in Western Union serving that. In this table here, I'm showing kind of what are known in the industry as the top corridors. So you'll see, as you'd expect, money flows from the wealthy countries of the United States, and then the Gulf states, Saudi and United Arab Emirates, and UK and Germany and Europe. And the outbound, so those are the inbound, and on the outbound, we're going to those big populous markets of India, China. I was talking to one colleague who was based in Mexico, and he was telling me that the corridor between the United States and Mexico is absolutely one of the most important in the world. But in Mexico, the number one source of income is through tourism, and then quickly, number two, second after that, is the income from remittances. So a huge dependency on that income in the market in Mexico. What that means in terms of our procurement is that we're very much working to regional calendars. We're working with local providers of marketing, branding, sending those kind of messages around cultural events. So for example, Ramadan, or it could be Red Letter Day in China, or even simple things like Father's Day or Mother's Day. So we have a network of those kind of vendor partners that help us enable those kind of tailored messaging. So that's number 3 around the demographics. Number 1 is act now on climate, and this one is to me is the most important. I mean, some people have said the pandemic was a challenge, but others are saying that will be kind of a mini test compared to the challenge of climate change that is coming. I like the quote of Boris Johnson recently where he says that climate change is not about just bunny hugging. It's more than that. It's actually all about business and changing those business models to be sustainable in the future. Some very good books out there recommend the Bill Gates, How to Avoid Climate Disaster. And in there, he kind of outlines the challenge that lies ahead, where we're currently emitting something like 51 billion tons of greenhouse carbon into the atmosphere every year. And the challenge is to get from 51 billion down to 0. And so the analogy he uses is like a bathtub with the taps running, and you can imagine as the water goes up, which represents the greenhouse gases, there comes a point where they spill over the lip of the bath. And that's the point where humanity, mankind, may not be able to kind of cope with some of the extreme weather events that may happen. So in a way, one another analogy has been, we've been having a party in the house, but the house is on fire. So lots to do there. The good news is we have many of the tools available through technology advances, and it's just a matter of will across all sectors of society. Getting from 51 to 0, and I think one thing I wanted to kind of highlight here is the concept of in finance, the concept of stranded assets. Many of you will be asking, okay, yeah, we recognize climate change, but how does that relate to finance, to payments, to banking, to those kind of financial services area of society? In actual fact, it's a key ingredient of our next journey, if you like. So the example I like to use is around the diesel car. Imagine you're a dealer with 1,000 diesel cars in your yard, and then a new regulation comes into the UK where they say the new sale of diesel and petrol cars will be banned from 2035, and oh, by the way, we'll bring that forward to 2030. So all of a sudden, the dealer is worried about how will he sell all those? Is there a risk that he may not be able to sell all those diesel cars? The consumer is worried about, well, what will be the secondary market when I go on to sell that diesel car in the future? The banks are further upstream in the financial supply chain are beginning to wonder, well, and one of the core functions of a bank is all around risk mitigation, ensuring that their loan book portfolio is avoiding risk. So again, they're questioning whether we can recover the funds from those loans out to diesel cars. And then finally, upstream, once those kind of loans are packaged into pension funds, we can see a lot of the pension fund portfolio managers, again, thinking and questioning, maybe we balance the risk by shifting our investments from carbon-based technologies into more green and clean energies. There's a lot of innovation happening out in the financial world. At an institutional level, we're seeing the advent of green bonds. At a consumer level, we're seeing a lot of fintechs innovating around consumer analytics, rewarding green patterns of spending. One great one I saw was around rewarding, building up loyalty points, and then giving the consumer a planted tree as a reward for their choices around green spending. We'll see a lot of emphasis on some core technologies. For example, battery technology was one such area. And again, it comes back to this regional concentration. Today, lithium-ion battery is central to that transition over time, and it's in a lot of the consumer goods that we use, the electronic goods. But today, there are about 40 large factories, predominantly in the Far East. Again, we're seeing policymakers rethink that. We had the news of the Gigafactory, for example, creating a battery technology outside of Berlin, and there's other regional areas coming into the picture as well. The battery technology as well, going back to this concept of keeping an eye on the next generation, is moving from lithium ion into lithium sulfur. So those things are in the pipeline. One last one, which I really enjoyed out in the news, was Tesla's Q1 earnings. They earned something like $500 million from the sale of green credits, where they can sell it to other polluting car manufacturers to avoid their penalties. So there's almost the kind of primary market and then secondary market. And to enable all of that, we're kind of working with those vendors, those partners who can offer those green choices in electronics, more kind of fuel-efficient devices, ones that are including multiple functions within a single device to reduce our carbon footprint. So I think that's a key to it, is unlocking that, is working with our partners. The next one is all around growing our network. And for me, this is all around the World Wide Web. We see tremendous growth here across all sectors. And I guess the internet was one of the big enablers for society, where it enables collaboration. Previously, our grandfathers were restricted to one location where they needed to kind of serve a particular market. Now it's scalable globally. There are no borders. And we're seeing the next wave coming with the Internet of Things. Smart devices will be embedded everywhere. And that creates new value propositions as well. And then future, in the decades to come, we'll see continuation into the space race, where there'll be a race for dominance in Mars and those other places. But that's way out in the future, and just kind of interested to see how that develops over time. But closer to home, closer to here and now, Western Union is working with various different branded agents, branded apps, really placing a big emphasis on our network. Without the network, we wouldn't be able to kind of reach all those different segments. We have different branded apps also on our mobile app as well. One example of global partnering is our partnership with Amazon, where those people who are unbanked or underbanked, they can actually buy goods on Amazon, they can pay in cash, and then they can get them delivered to wherever they like. So a great enabling model there of two partners coming together. Regionally, this is also very critically important. And for today's session, I've highlighted three examples. One is from telecoms, one is from retail, and one is from banking. The first one is around STC Pay. So that's Saudi telecom company, where Western Union is in partnership there to create a mobile wallet serving millions of migrants who are working in the Gulf states. There's huge population flows from places as far as India and the Philippines, working in the Gulf states and then sending money back home. So a really important one for us there. The second one is probably one of the most well-recognized retailers in the world, which is Walmart in the United States. And again, similarly, we're partnering with them to really expand our retail footprint across thousands of locations all across America. And it brings convenience and choice. Consumers can either decide to make their payments online or while they're doing their weekly groceries. Some people really enjoy being in the retail environment and experiencing that. And then the third one is all around one which may not be a household name in this part of the world, but this is Bank Rakyat of Indonesia. And we see Indonesia as a very significantly strategic market, a very important market. And again, here through our partnership, we can access thousands of retail locations. And I think Rakyat has a consumer base of over 30 million plus consumers. So instantly you can see, you can get closer to the consumers in all of those different markets. So from a procurement point of view, we're working with regional providers who have the know-how, the local knowledge, can work with the regulators, have already customer acquisition already in place. And then on top of that, we're leveraging those kind of platform economies, those going back to our cross-border platform and settlements engine. So those are the key aspects of networking. And then lastly, my last principle is all around speaking up on ethics. And this is one that's very dear to me. I think it's something that companies can't avoid to have. They can't be silent on this. They need to have a voice. And one key example of this is around income inequality. There's been many studies over the past number of decades with Oxfam, for example, highlighting that 1% of the wealthiest population have the same wealth as the 50% of the poorest. So that's a model that has huge risk, societal risk, of course, of disruption and so on, but it's also unsustainable. So a key thing is really to speak up on ethics, and I think governments, but also businesses have a role to play on this and can really help shape the conversation here. So on ethics, I have 3 examples here where Western Union is very vocal, very active in the market through social media, for example. The first one is all around social equity, where Western Union really kind of voiced its support on the Floyd George case, the tragic case there, playing a role supporting minority groups of society, helping them to set up small and medium-sized businesses. The second area there is around the troubled regions, and there are very many around the world, but most recently in Myanmar, where Western Union is providing mobile apps. They're also providing regular updates on the availability of their retail locations. So that really helps families to move funds in and out of the country in those troubled regions. And then thirdly, the area of COVID support. And through Western Union's charitable foundation, there's been a huge effort and great fundraising where we've supplied millions of fundraising to support the distribution of medical equipment and information updates. So all of this is kind of in the mix. It ties back to business culture. When we're looking for new partners or new vendors, when we're procuring technology, we're looking for those partners who have kind of a similar outlook on life. And we spend a lot of time during the vendor onboarding. And that's really to make sure that we have that due diligence in place, that we take care to make sure that it's a mutually beneficial cooperation between those partners. We'll keep a firm eye on safeguarding the data. Again, that is critical for the whole financial industry as a whole. The word credit comes from the Latin credo, which means I believe. And also on the regulatory affairs, of course, this is a key area where, in fact, Western Union differentiates itself because of its depth of knowledge in regulatory affairs and its relationships with the various regulators in the different regions and the different markets. So those are the 6 kind of principles, if you like, how to navigate the changing world. The last one, I just wanted to end on a kind of a quote I enjoyed as we move from tall ships to spaceships. This is a quote from a famous American biologist, where we live in a world with Star Wars civilization, with Stone Age emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And I couldn't resist having a photo of Millennium Falcon from my days as a kid. So that's it for me, and I'll say thank you very much indeed to everybody.
Wow, Andreas, incredible story. Thanks for sharing. A lot to learn from it.
Delighted to participate, Mindaugas. Thank you very much.
As a matter of fact, Markit being 70 years company and Western Union being 170 years company have so much in common.
Absolutely, and I think the kind of same philosophy of working across borders in a borderless world, that's something we very much share in common. We're also great collaborators and have been for many years.
Sure.
And that's a key area to unlock value in the market, to work together to collaborate.
Yeah, that's for sure. May I ask a few questions?
Absolutely,
all right.
Delighted.
So one, it relates to the principle number 1, which was adapt or die. You mentioned the lesson from pandemics and single point of failure. Would you mind to mention and say the top failure you faced and the learnings from it, what you learned from it, you and your team?
Yeah. Well, I think the broader question in the market was around the governments had this difficult decision of when to kind of go into lockdown. So in the early stages of the pandemic, that was a difficult learning for many pandemics. And for us, the key learning was to be agile, to adapt to those whatever the health guidelines were in the market. But it became apparent very quickly that we needed to solve the health crisis first before we could solve the economic crisis affecting many parts of the world. Yeah.
And you did well. Then the next question I would ask about Act on Climate, which we're really enthusiastic about this topic and principle. What particular actions you did to go to the zero, as you mentioned?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mindaugas, and I think it's really on all levels of society, from government to business to individuals. Personally, it's over 10 years since I owned a car. I decided to dump the car. There's nothing nicer than walking, especially on a beautiful day like this in Vilnius. And I joined a tree group where I'm really promoting the concept of making urban spaces green and more human spaces. But also in terms of my work life, I really kind of looking for those partners who can offer those new innovations in green technologies. And part of this whole network, I look forward to connecting with many colleagues to learn those new opportunities in that area.
Great example.
Yep.
I should sell my car as well. Anyway, do you think in the future companies like Western Union will choose the partners and suppliers based only on sustainability criteria?
I think the key question is around the green premium. So historically, the fossil fuel industries had a kind of subsidized, but now that's going away. There's a kind of a shift now where the new greener technologies are competitive on a price level. So once that green premium is no longer part of the equation, absolutely, we certainly want to partner up with those where we have a choice to go for those greener vendors or providers, suppliers, products as well.
So definitely it's coming.
Yeah.
Now, let's look to the audience questions as well. I got one cool question, and it's coming from Estonia, Mr. Peter. He's asking, will Western Union survive another 200 years, and why?
Well, I hope so. I think that's the great unknown. And what I would say is none of us can be complacent in this market. The best tools that we have are just to keep that agility, to spot the opportunities in the market, to collaborate with the partners, and to go for it. I think there's kind of, you need three things. You need to be smart, you need to have that kind of initiative and energy, and you've also got to show that integrity. And once you have those, everything is solvable.
And another 200 years,
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, great answer. And thanks again, Andreas, for being here and presenting. And back to you, Margus Stalin.